This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive exclusive perks. Link in the description. Daisy the Diesel Railcar is many things. She was one of the first Diesel characters in Thomas & Friends. She was the very first female engine in the series, in the books and the show. She's snooty, she's selfish, and she's fabulous. But what if I told you she almost didn't exist? Season 2 is one of the most beloved seasons of Thomas & Friends. It introduced so much to the show, a plethora of memorable characters and classic stories that everyone remembers. After Season 1's home run success in 1984, a second season was inevitable. But with that second season came a domino effect of production issues. Season 1 was based on the first 8 books of the Railway series in order. So naturally, Season 2 could cover the next 8 or so books. The only issue was, there was a lot of books that featured characters and stories that would have ballooned the budget. The narrow gauge engines were out of the question at this time, as they didn't really know how they would tackle their props, so all their books were skipped over. Another issue they faced was the severe lack of Thomas stories in the books left to adapt at this point. The show had to abide by a contract at this time that all episodes had to be based on stories written by the Audrey family. Christopher Audrey was the author of the books at this time, and he was commissioned to specially write another book centered around Thomas, just so the show could have more Thomas stories to fill out their roster. And on top of all of that, midway through production of the season, several episodes got canceled, and others were scrambled together to fill the quota. This season was not smooth sailing. What we're going to dive into today is the theory that Daisy the Diesel Railcar was never meant to appear this year, and her debut was all a circumstantial result of Season 2's messy production. And to get there, we're going to have to look at the season's full production history and do some heavy speculation on why so many things changed from the original plan. Let's start at the beginning. I think a good place to start our research is by figuring out what the original lineup of episodes for the second season were. And I think the best way to go about that is by looking at the earliest pre-production work for the season, the concept art by Robert Gall Galliers. Galliers drew up several of the new sets this season, many of which can be found online, and some of them have episode numbers on them. These numbers correspond to the episodes that these sets were meant to appear in. We'll start with the concept art of Tidmouth Station and Yard, also known as Tidmouth's B-Zone. This set features Tidmouth Station, the branch line engine's sheds, and the station master's house that Thomas crashed into. Episodes 7, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 24 are marked here. I think it's safe to assume that 7 is Percy and the Signal, and 24 is Ghost Train. Those are those episodes' actual numbers in the final lineup. 17, 18, 19, and 20 likely refer to the cancelled episode The Missing Coach, which we all know was mostly filmed on this set thanks to leaked photos, Brake Van, The Deputation, and Thomas Comes to Breakfast, all of which are consecutive in the final order. Strangely, there's a couple episodes not accounted for here that use the Tidmouth set. Thomas, Percy, and the Coles episode number is not listed on this, despite a large portion of that episode being filmed on the Tidmouth set too. But if you'll notice, the concept art does not feature the coal loader that appears on the final set in that episode. Perhaps we can assume that the episode was originally going to take place on a completely different set? A Thomas's branch line set like Elsbridge, maybe? Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree is not accounted for either, despite a large portion of it taking place on this set as well. So maybe that was going to take place somewhere like Knapford originally. And Better Late Than Never is not accounted for here either. But I'll get to that one later. Next up is New Harbor Area, aka the harbor that Percy and Toby helped build this season. The art states that this appears in episodes 9 and 10. Episode 9 is Percy and Harold, which makes sense, as the harbor is built in that episode. Taking into consideration that Percy's promise naturally follows that story in the books, and was planned for this season before being cancelled, I think it's safe to assume that 10 is Percy's Promise. Percy likely would have collected Annie and Clarabelle from here, as he does in the original book story. New Harbor also appears heavily in Thomas and Trevor, which is not accounted for here, but more on that later. Next is the barber shop at Crosby. This only appears in one episode, as the art very clearly states. Episode 15, A Close Shave. Next up is the scrapyard on Edward's Line, and this appears in Saved from Scrap. That episode is marked as episode 13? Huh? Well, that just throws a wrench into all of this. Saved from Scrap is the 4th episode in the final order, and it being 13 here is just odd. Considering A Close Shave is the 3rd episode in a 3-parter, and is listed as 15, that would mean that the whole Duck and Diesel trilogy would have had to been split up. My only conclusion to this is that the episode production order was out of order, so maybe we can't take the numbers here so literally. Nonetheless, Saved from Scrap is marked off. Next up is Brendam Harbor, and this appears in episodes 12, 21, 22, and 23. 12 is definitely Percy Takes the Plunge. There's even additional concept art here that shows the famous plunge scene from that. It's interesting that they always planned to have this story take place here, instead of at the New Harbor as it did in the books. 21, 22, and 23 has gotta be referring to the Diesel, Wrong Road, and Edward's Exploit, the 3 consecutive Bill and Ben episodes. We have other concept art too, though all without episode numbers on them. We have some of the crossing at Wellsworth Junction with Bertie present, which seemingly confirms Bertie's chase. We have one depicting Percy at the hayfields, which confirms Woolly Bear. And we have one of a sawmill, which I'm assuming refers to Trevor's flashback in Saved from Scrap, which we already have marked off. So just from the concept art alone, we have 16 episodes confirmed from the original lineup, and this here is their relative order with the numbers marked. Now we can start the process of deduction to figure out the others. We have 3 of the 4 Percy the Small Engine stories, so from that we can safely assume that episode 8 is Duck Takes Charge. A Close Shave is on here, so the other 2 Duck and Diesel episodes have to be here somewhere too. For the sake of keeping this easy to understand, I'm going to move Saved from Scrap up to episode 4 as it is in the final order, and fill in 13 and 14 with Pop Goes the Diesel and Dirty Work. With 2 of the 4 Edward the Blue Engine episodes here, let's go ahead and throw Cows and Old Iron in their respective places too, filling out 2 and 5. Now let's look at the cancelled episodes. We know Doubleheader and Gordon Goes Foreign were also planned for this season early on. We have production notes for Gordon Goes Foreign which state that they would have dressed Henry up with a new face and smoke deflectors to disguise him as the Big City Engine. And we have a full leaked script for Doubleheader. So let's throw those 2 in here somewhere. Duck appears in Gordon Goes Foreign, so that would have to be sometime after Duck Takes Charge. I'll place Foreign as number 11 for now. Doubleheader directly takes place after Foreign. The opening of the leaked script directly references the events of it. So let's slide the Percy episodes up a slot and place Doubleheader as 11, moving Foreign up to 10. This is throwing everything off from the concept art numbers, I'm aware, but just bear with me here. We're just trying to count the original 26 right now. And lastly, we can look at the Christopher Audrey stories that were commissioned this year specifically for Season 2. This season was strapped for Thomas stories, as evident by there only being 1 on this list so far. Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree was another story Chris was also commissioned this year, so that the show could have a dedicated Christmas episode. So let's go ahead and throw that at the end as the finale, and fill in slots 1 and 16 with Thomas Percy on the coal, and The Runaway from More About Thomas the Tank Engine. And that, I think, is a pretty good idea of what the Season 2 lineup was originally going to look like. Obviously, this is just a guess at what the order was, and I'm sure it's not right. But I think it's safe to say that these were the 26 episodes. Some things worth noting here. Doubleheader would have been Toby's only lead role this season, and it also would have given James another episode. He only has 1 in the final lineup. Percy's Promise properly takes place before Plunge here, making the continuity sound. The scene where Percy brags about braving a flood in the past to Bill and Ben makes sense now.
It was raining hard. Water swirled under my boiler. I couldn't see where I was going, but I struggled on.
And the most interesting thing of note, Thomas Comes to Breakfast occurs right before the diseasel. This alone seems to confirm that Daisy was never meant to be in this season at this time, and that Breakfast was originally going to be a standalone episode, rather than the first part of a major story arc as it is in the books. Rather than saying this at the end,
Meanwhile, a diesel railcar will do your work.
the script could have easily just had the Fat Controller say, a diesel instead. And perhaps that diesel was going to be Boko, who gets introduced in the very next episode in this order. It is quite strange, admittedly, and a bit difficult to wrap my head around, especially considering that Boko doesn't even work remotely near Thomas's branch line. This is kind of alluded to in the 1990 book adaptation Breakfast Time for Thomas, which ends with Boko coming to the railway to help out while Thomas is away being repaired. Could this book have used an original unedited version of the script for reference? Who's to say? So this is, more or less, the lineup of episodes that the season production began with in September 1985. Scripts were written for all the episodes, and I think it was around this point that the first big hiccup occurred. 2 episodes were scrapped, Gordon Goes Foreign and Doubleheader. As per Rob Gallagher's interview with SIF, Gordon Goes Foreign was cut because it proved to be too expensive for the budget. Doubleheader indeed had a full script written up for it, but its reason for being cut has never been disclosed. As far as I know, there's no production notes that suggest either of these made it to the filming stage. I would imagine Gordon Goes Foreign surely would have been marked on Tidmouth's concept art if it was, seeing as the production note that we have for it says that this scene takes place at Tidmouth, and it isn't. Obviously, these two had to be replaced with something to fill the 26 episode quota, and the team would not have moved on to the filming stage without knowing what those were going to be. And oh, we are going to discuss that in a moment. Boy, are we. But for the sake of keeping this video easy to follow, we're going to move on. At this point, concept art of all the new locations started to be drawn up. Props of all the new characters were built, and some details were changed, such as having Thomas, Percy, and the Cole take place at Tidmouth. With everything more or less ready to go, filming commenced. Now this next part is mostly speculation, with no confirmed timeline of events, so take all of this with a grain of salt. As we know from crew testimony, the big yard and station sets were always the first constructed and filmed every season, as they were the most time-consuming to put together, and required the most footage. These are where most of the lengthy conversation scenes occur, after all. I believe Knapford Station and the yards were the first sets built and filmed on for this season, which is supported by some of the characters' new faces being incomplete in these scenes. Edward looks so scary without eyebrows. Duck's prop is also incomplete in these scenes. As this photo shows, the long handrail on his tank sides is missing its stanchions, and his bunker is lacking a handrail entirely. He also has no whistle. He gained all of these after the Knapford scenes were shot. Tidmouth Sheds was the next set built, and Tidmouth Station and Yard followed that. And that can be confirmed by Percy's center front lamp iron. In all the Knapford, Tidmouth Sheds, and most of the Tidmouth Yard scenes, it looks normal. At some point prior to the snow scenes on the Tidmouth set being filmed, it snapped off and was hastily glued back on. The glob of glue, as seen here, is present on Percy in literally all other scenes with him in Season 2. It is impossible to unnotice it. My guess is it broke off while they were filming this scene for Ghost Train, when a working lamp was fixed onto it. I speculate that it was around this time that everything really started to get messed up. As we all know, filming had gotten midway through the episode The Missing Coach when Britt Allcroft stepped in and opted to cancel that episode entirely, for she thought the plot was too confusing for kids, and the story lacked action. Every scene that was required on the Tidmouth sets was filmed, as supported by the variety of photos that we have of the cancelled episode, and I would like to think that the footage of all this still exists somewhere. With the first episode of Donald and Douglas's 3-part arc axed, A brief intro to them was squeezed into the beginning of Breakvan, making use of some of the missing coach footage. But that wasn't the only big hiccup during filming, because Percy's Promise got axed too. My assumption for this one getting the axe is because the crew feared the effect of Percy traveling through the flood would not have been convincing. As the leaked visual script states, they planned to use carved out perspex with fine tissue to make it look like Percy was traveling into water, hiding it with lots of steam. I don't know about you guys, but that sounds pretty bad looking to me. Especially since they actually submerged Percy into real water in Plunge in this same season. Either way, the episode got cut. And this is very unfortunate, because now Percy mentioning the events of this story in Plunge make no sense. So at this point, we are now down 4 episodes in this 26 episode season, and they had a quota to fill. So now it's time to put our tinfoil hats on and speculate. What new stories replaced which? And more importantly, why? The 4 replacement episodes ended up being Better Late Than Ever, Thomas and Trevor, Daisy, and Percy's Predicament. Let's start with Better Late Than Never. So this is one of the stories in More About Thomas the Tank Engine that Chris Audrey wrote for this season. Many claim that the big giveaway that this was a replacement episode is the set of Tidmouth, and that it looks a little different to how it looks in all the other episodes, and thus must have been rebuilt at some point to film the new scenes for the replacement episode. But to be honest, I don't know exactly what the differences are. I examined and compared so many shots of Tidmouth from this season, and at first, I thought the big difference was the area with the road here to accommodate Bertie. It is not present here in Thomas Comes to Breakfast, for instance, where the yard tracks are much closer to the station building. But the big road area is also present in Missing Christmas Tree, so that confirmed nothing. I think it's safe to assume that Tidmouth was definitely rebuilt at some point during production, and they moved things around to get certain shots. But whether it was rebuilt specifically to film Better Late Than Ever remains uncertain. While I'm not 100% sure on Tidmouth itself, there are a couple other hints that do suggest Better Late Than Never is a replacement episode. The other major set that appears in this is Elsbridge, which was the last set that they built during Season 2's production. More on that later. There is also this level crossing set, likely another last-minute build, as its only other appearance is in Percy's Predicament, one of the pickup episodes. And let's also take note of how Thomas's sad face is painted here. It matches how it looks in this tracking shot from Thomas Comes to Breakfast, which does not match how it's painted at the end of that episode, which was from the original shoot. The face was repainted sometime prior to the Upper Brendam set being built, as it gets used here in The Runaway. And this shot was a pickup filmed later at the at some point rebuilt Tidmouth set, with the big road area present, around the same time that Better Late Than Ever was filmed. I'll go ahead and slot Better Late Than Ever in at episode 17, replacing the missing coach. Next up is Thomas and Trevor, which is such an odd choice compared to everything else. This was the only episode not based on a book from the Railway series, but instead an annual story written by Chris Audrey. I really feel like they were grasping at straws with this one, but as it was still an Audrey-written story, it technically still fulfilled the requirement that everything must be adapted from Audrey material. I think they were happy to greenlight this one for a couple reasons. It gave Trevor, one of their new characters, a second appearance this season, so that was good for marketing. It gave Thomas another big role, something they were strapped for this year. And most importantly, this story took place during the construction of the new harbor, so it gave the new harbor set a second episode to appear in after being cut from Percy's Promise, justifying the cost of building it. Elsbridge also appears in this one, the last set they built this season. Considering that this story has to take place before Percy moves to the harbor in Duck Takes Charge, let's slide the Percy stories down again and slip Thomas and Trevor in as episode 6. With Percy's Promise gone, let's also go ahead and move the Runaway up to episode 10, so what is now Harold's second appearance follows his intro story. So that leaves 2 episode slots left. And this is where the Queen herself enters the scene. Daisy and Percy's predicament. I think these 2 felt like natural picks, since they already had Thomas Comes to Breakfast in the works. That story was originally written as a setup for Daisy, and now they didn't have to alter any of it to make it a standalone. Well, that worked out, didn't it? There was only one big problem. They didn't build a Daisy prop. There is so much evidence that points to Daisy being built in the 11th hour, while the season was being filmed. She reuses so many of Boko's parts, the only other big diesel prop in the show at this time. The chassis is his, and she uses casts of his faces, just with makeup thrown onto them. She's kind of a whack prop in my opinion. You can tell they had to design her around Boko's chassis, leading to some weird body proportions and placements of things. Since she reused Boko's faces instead of being given her own, the face sits very low, which places her buffer beam under it extremely low, and it hangs down really far. I imagine if she was given her own specially designed faces from the get-go, they would have been more squat, more akin to how she looked in the books. Daisy being built way after the fact is also supported by the fact that she does not appear at Tidmouth with the rest of the whole cast in Missing Christmas Tree, because by this point the Tidmouth set had already been built, and all scenes had been filmed on it. And I'm sure the show crew did not see any point in reshooting this entire scene again, just to add Daisy in the background somewhere. It's also worth mentioning that Daisy's name board this year was the only one not shot somewhere on the Tidmouth set. It was shot on the New Harbor set, which was a later built one. It may also be worth pointing out that all of Percy's journey in Percy's predicament is made up of stock footage from other episodes. These 2 shots are pulled directly from Percy and Harold, and this shot is an unused one filmed from presumably Woolly Bear or Percy Takes the Plunge, as he's traveling along Edward's Line, passing the scrapyard here. The show crew always took a big celebratory group photo on the last day of shooting, and as you can see here, the set they're standing above is Elsbridge. A big portion of Percy's predicament, and pretty much all of Daisy, take place on the Elsbridge set. So it's pretty clear that these episodes were the last ones filmed. I think Elsbridge was always planned to appear this year in episodes like Woolly Bear and Percy and the Signal, but it ended up having way more filmed on it than originally planned when everything changed. It was the final big set, and they had episodes to make up for, so they ended up cramming as much as they could on it. I wouldn't be surprised if this big yard with sheds that only appears here in this season was added simply so they could accommodate filming Daisy, which required the characters to survey the sheds. As these 2 stories take place after Thomas Comes to Breakfast, let's slide everything up to squeeze them into the number 19 and 20 slots respectively. And there you go. I think that is a fairly accurate idea of how they arrived at the final Season 2 episode list. There is one detail that I know some of you are thinking I missed, so let me go ahead and bring it up. The viaduct. Despite the season's messy production, Season 2 strangely had this concise continuity with the viaduct. In all episodes prior to Better Late Than Ever, the viaduct looks as normal. In Better Late Than Ever, a plot point required the viaduct to be repaired, and it gains scaffolding all around it. The scaffolding remains on it in every appearance it makes following that episode. So you're probably all thinking, how did they plan ahead for this if Better Late Than Ever was never in the cards originally? My theory goes that pretty much all the mainline countryside run-by sets like this were built towards the end of filming, because they were comparatively simpler to set up than the more complicated big industrial sets. I'm willing to bet that the viaduct set had not been set up before the big changes in the episode roster occurred. This explains why we have a shot of Edward transporting Trevor on the viaduct, clearly meant for Thomas and Trevor, a last-minute episode. And why we have shots of Daisy, a very late-in-the-game edition, on countryside run-by sets like this one. I'm also willing to bet the same for the quarry scenes in Percy's predicament. It was another set that hadn't been built yet when the changes occurred. Now, for the plot twist in all of this. This theory is no longer a theory. Literally, as of Wednesday this week, the Daisy theory has been confirmed. On August 13th, it was announced that there would be an auction of everything in Britt Allcroft's estate. Lots of great stuff up for grabs here, including concept art from Magic Railroad, hundreds and hundreds of production photos, crew shirts and jackets, and episode scripts. This lot, number 30, features 22 original scripts from Series 2, and these are the episodes featured according to the description. None of the 4 replacement episodes are featured here. Lot 31 features the final scripts for the final filmed episodes. One of the pages shown here is Percy's Predicament. At the top of the document, you'll see the code 2017X. 20 is the episode's official number, and 17X refers to the episode it replaced, aka the missing coach. We have confirmation, people. Daisy and Percy's Predicament replaced the missing coach and Percy's Promise. And Better Late and Trevor replaced Foreign and Doubleheader. Holy crap. The timing of this auction's announcement truly is impeccable. The day before this video was going to go up for early access on Patreon. I cannot believe it. What are the odds? Link to the auction is in the description below. So that was a ton of information thrown at you guys. I hope I didn't make it too confusing and you were able to follow. But just to make sure that we are all on the same page, let's do a brief recap. This list here was probably the original episode roster, as supported by concept art and leaked scripts. Daisy's episodes were not considered at this time, and Thomas Comes to Breakfast was going to be a standalone episode rather than a part 1. Gordon Goes Foreign and Doubleheader got axed before filming began, and were replaced with Better Late Than Ever and Thomas and Trevor. Midway through filming, The Missing Coach and Percy's Promise also got axed. Daisy and Percy's Predicament were greenlit, replacing those. To adapt Daisy's stories, they had to scramble together a Daisy prop, using several parts borrowed from Boko to construct her. As an 11th hour addition, Daisy's episodes were the final ones filmed, and mostly took place on the last set built for the season, Elsbridge. Whew. I think that's everything. It's funny in hindsight how much trouble they went through to bring Daisy to the screen this season, because Daisy ended up being a controversial character here in America. Rick Sigelkow, the co-producer of Britt Allcroft's Shining Time Station, disapproved of her greatly. He thought the first female engine of the series being snooty and the exaggerated makeup she wore was sexist. And thus, her episodes never aired on Shining Time Station here, making their debut years later on home media. Daisy ended up being phased out of the show as a result of this. But it's funny how things 180 over time, because Daisy was brought back years later in the CGI series, and they really made up for lost time with her. Daisy appeared so often in CGI that she may as well have been a main character.
I'm highly sprung, you see. Tip-top and thoroughly modern.
Her personality was so strong that crafting stories about her came naturally. It was so easy to imagine how Daisy would interact with any character or respond to any given situation. And not to mention, her CGI model improved greatly on the prop's shortcomings. Despite its messy production, I still love Season 2 to death. This season still managed to push the limits of what could be done in Thomas. This was the first season filmed at Shepperton Studios, and you can tell they took advantage of how unrestricted they were now. They played with the camera movements so much this season, and the big sets this year truly felt big and gritty. Season 2 is a perfect sequel to Season 1. It took the characters and settings that were there and pushed the envelope with them. Let's see what lies beyond Edward Station. Let's see what makes that little green tank engine from last season tick. Let's see dieselization occur. Let's allude to what's happening on the other railway and the real world. In all honesty, I think the final episode order is much stronger than the original roster. I love that we got an episode focused on the New Harbor's construction, so we actually got to see it. We got to see Trevor more, and we got to see the whole story arc that Breakfast kicked off. I'm so glad that we got Daisy. She's such a fun character, and it would have been such a shame if they just went and skipped over her. Toby may have lost his lead role, but it ended up working out, because he's such a main player in the Daisy stories. A happy coincidence. And we didn't really lose out on many of those cancelled episodes either. Percy's Promise and Doubleheader did end up getting adapted in Season 3, and the higher budget that year was definitely a point in Percy's Promise's favor. The flood scene would just not have looked good if it wasn't real water. Gordon Goes Foreign forever remained unadapted, though it was treated as having canonically happened in the series finale, Thomas and the Royal Engine, when Gordon recounts the events of it.
I know the way to London after all, and have been there before, you know. Not the station names again, Gordon. I just wish they would make up their minds on what to call London Station.
I think the only major casualty of the changes was the loss of the missing coach. I do agree with Britt that the story is confusing, but I wish that we still got it. If it were up to me, I would have done without Better Late Than Ever, honestly. A very meh episode in a season of envelope pushing. I'd sacrifice this pretty mid-story about Thomas helping Bertie to keep all the lost context for Donald and Douglas's fear of being sent away. The missing coach footage continues to be one of the most sought-after pieces of Lost Thomas media. It's so enticing because, unlike the other 3 episodes, we know that it was mostly filmed. With any hope, the footage may still exist somewhere out there on someone's hard drive. I mean, if the footage of the pilot of all things survived and resurfaced in 2025, I reckon anything is possible. The search continues. This pick of the week has nothing to do with Daisy, but with Oliver instead. It's Oliver's Cliffside Collapse by the Train Modeler. I know I've spotlighted him a couple times now, but this new video by him is really something. A completely original story about Oliver and Toad, filmed entirely with custom models on a huge stunt set. It's brilliantly shot and edited, and the story itself is quite touching. The behind-the-scenes segment afterwards is also worthy of a watch, in which Lucas explains how they accomplished everything. Go check this out if you haven't already, and support the creativity. I'd like to give you all a big thank you to the warm reception of Sidetracked. The video on Timothy was pretty fun to make. I want to stress that not every future episode will be exactly like that one. I know a big part of it was dedicated to researching a headcanon for Timothy, and I imagine an episode on, say, Boko, for instance, would not feature that. So I'm still feeling out a proper structure for this miniseries, and I think that will come in time once we're a few in. I have a couple videos in the works right now, but the next episode of Sidetracked will follow those soon. And that is about all I have for you today, folks. I'm going to let the music play out to give all my wonderful patrons some time for their names to appear on the screen here. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll see y'all in the next one.